right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're doing a live stream again with the Riverbird Clinic and Good Medicine out of Portland, Maine. All right, here we are. We're live on Instagram. Hi, everybody. Joe Moore, CEO, co-founder of Psychedelics Today, joined by Selma Holden and Matt Stevens of the Riverbird Clinic and Good Medicine in Portland, Maine. Selma, how are you today?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Beautiful day here in Colorado. And Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Also sunny here in Portland, Maine.
Outstanding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sunny Portland is special in the winter. That's
Mhm.
great. Cool. So, Selma, you and I had the opportunity to meet a few years ago. I wonder actually if it was pre-pandemic or not in Portland, Maine. It might have been post. I'm not sure. But we did a little meetup in Portland and we got to chatting. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool community care model. And I want to learn more. But it took me years to get to you. So here we are.
And we've been through a variety of growth and rebirth cycles too. So I'm happy to show up with what's happening now at our clinic and Good Medicine Collective.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about both organizations, Selma?
Sure. Riverbird Clinic started as a group of physicians and therapists and psychiatric nurse practitioners who were interested actually in doing MAPS's expanded access clinical trial. So
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to offer MDMA therapy in the unique design of the trial that they were doing, which was an unblinded version of offering MDMA assisted psychotherapy for people with treatment resistant post traumatic stress, and a model that wasn't in the formality of a clinical trial where there's an arm where people are getting placebo. And it was an effort to try and increase access. And we were really excited about that. So we got together and we started thinking about it. We officially formed as Riverbird in 2018-19. And we also learned that research is a long process. And so we started for our own skill building and just for the ability to offer services immediately to folks to train in ketamine assisted therapy. Ketamine assisted psychotherapy or therapy is sort of a nuance that we land in because we're not all psychotherapists in that trained model. And we have other modalities that include mindfulness and include somatic therapies, yoga therapy. We landed with ketamine assisted therapy. So we've been offering ketamine assisted therapy historically in that traditional 2 provider, 1 client model. And as we got our skills built up and our comfort, we also were noticing that it's expensive. And so we were one of the first groups, at least on the East Coast, to offer group ketamine assisted therapy in that model. And then simultaneously,
Mm-hmm.
Good Medicine, the community and the physical building, the nonprofit and the community was growing around us, where we were trying to incorporate all different integrative medicine modalities to assist people with preparation and integration and just other ways to access expanded states of consciousness.
Mm, I love
So
that.
it's and so yeah, we've been in this process and we've learned a lot. We've had our mistakes, we've had our wins, and um, and then what's been really exciting is how Good Medicine has just flourished and grown. So to not
Mm-hmm.
just center around the psychedelic medicine, but actually the healing process.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And like it's much needed and it's interesting that in a place like Maine that there's not more interest and attention, but it's also a somewhat conservative place, right? Like we don't really think of Maine being like Louisiana or something, but there's some like slight conservative attitudes, especially towards medicine I find in New England. So I'm happy that you guys are, helping push that forward. And Matt, can you speak from your perspective how you kind of got involved here?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I was part of the founding group of Riverbird starting in 2018. I come from the angle of primary care and integrative medicine, and yeah, was trained in integrative medicine, which really kind of opened my mind and my heart to just other ways of being in the medical context with people. And through some of those experiences, uh, got a chance to spend a lot more time with patients than you typically would in a primary care setting, and take detailed histories, including trauma histories. And then being in an integrative medicine clinic, we would see really difficult to treat kind of illnesses or sufferings like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, migraines, IBS. And with these detailed histories and trauma histories, we'd start seeing more and more of this lining up. It was kind of like a little light bulb going off. And all along the way, since college, I've been interested in psychedelics. And in fellowship was more vocal about that with some of my preceptors and mentors that were teaching me. And that eventually got me connected to more like-minded people in the area, some of those being like Selma and the other members of our group. And I went on to practice primary care in kind of a typical corporate setting. But after about 5 or 6 years, found that I was wanting to work deeper with people in their healing processes, get more to root causes, and following the scientific literature as it was coming out. It seemed like there was a real there. So yeah, I just took that interest that way and joined the group in Riverbird. And I've been practicing with ketamine and was trained in MDMA therapy as well through MAPS for the last 5 years.
Outstanding. And this is a slight curveball for you, Matt, but I'm curious about like a DO's perspective on this compared to what like a traditional allopath might see in this kind of psychedelic medicine context.
Yeah. I think it's highly variable, right? So like Selma is an MD, and she is also faculty at University of New England, an osteopathic medical school, and so there's a huge amount of diversity, and generalizations can be helpful, but sometimes blunt instruments. What I would say is that oftentimes seeing the whole person in context actually takes practice. It takes practice to actually see the totality and the complexity of the human being. And of all the virtues of Western medicine, one of them is that it's powerful, it's technical, but it's not particularly holistic. And so I think, being trained from the very beginning in my medical career to have a bit more of a holistic, interconnected perspective certainly like open the door quicker, I would say. There's like a natural opening there to see how the mind, the body, the spirit are all connected. But yeah, I think that's what I could say about that. It's highly variable. It kind of goes a little bit back to the enculturation of like the New England and the work with psychedelics here. And there is a certain brand of conservatism that exists here. And I think it's like kind of more institutional. There's like a lot of clout given to like the institutional knowledge that's been built up. It's quite academic here. So it's not that people's minds aren't open. It's just that they have an ordering of things that they want to see before the mind wants to open. And in the case of psychedelics, sometimes it's a steep learning curve to get there for some people. And so we could feel that. And I think that definitely was, especially at the outset of this project, feeling kind of like we were really in the Wild West being in Maine and just kind of going about our business very quietly for quite some time.
And just to add on to it. Yeah, yes. Totally. The body is a system and a whole that has inclusion of body, mind, and spirit is one of those osteopathic tenets. And simultaneously, the innate healing mechanism, the body has its own innate ability to heal itself. It's just osteopathy emphasizes that if we can set up the right conditions for an individual, that they can go and they know how to heal. And we can hold that in a very physiologic level of like when a cut happens, we know our bodies know how to heal a cut, but that can also extend into the psyche. And so what's really nice about, and it sort of ties in a little bit into the criticisms that happens in the FDA approval of MDMA, is that innate healing mechanism can also go into the big S self, say, in internal family systems. So that's where osteopathy also can tie in more easily with psychedelic work.
Can you speak a little bit to that criticism? And like a lot of the criticism was really, really sharp tongued and unfair in that, just straight up calling it like a cult dynamic and like, unscientific thinking. And like your metaphor there of the cut, that's a great one. And Michael Mithofer would use that analogy in his trainings. And our breathwork teachers used to do breathwork with Michael and Annie before they left Vermont. And so this analogy of like, is it am I healing your gigantic gash or are you? And
Mm.
there's this story that we tell in holotropic breathwork around dream shadow transpersonal breathwork. Trying not to get in any copyright issues here. I haven't received a cease and
Understood.
desist in a while, but yeah, the idea is we are helping create a container in which you can heal.
Yeah.
We're not healing you. It's we're
Mhm.
Yeah.
helping your body know
Mm.
it's safe and okay to heal. And the emergency room analogy is also there. Like I'm cleaning it out so that your body can heal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
properly, right? And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
isn't it in man, it's one of these somatic guys has this story about like getting in the beginning of his book getting hit by a car and he's like letting the EMTs like telling them to back off so we can shake and like move the trauma through so PTSD doesn't get stuck. Like I think that's
Yeah.
another good
Mm.
one. Like we have this capacity, we just unlearned it in
Mhm.
Yeah.
contemporary culture, right?
Yeah. That's Peter Levine's story, if I'm
I think
remembering.
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
and and it's such a great story, and it was just really interesting to see on this larger, like nationwide federal level, about how we were having this distrust in the body's innate healing mechanism, and that was just sort of being displayed. And just like there was so many criticisms going around, but in that one particular about being cult-like because this was this brand new idea that was being proposed in the MDMA therapy trials about the innate healing intelligence, as it's called in that
Mm-hmm.
training. And it was, and just thinking about the people who are on the FDA and how they think about the body really mechanistically, and the power dynamics, in the sense of medicine and the institutions that we're in can sometimes fall into this like, we are healing you, we like, or the antibiotics are healing you, or like whatever interventions are being offered. And and just to see that happen, and be inflated to such a yeah, large stage, was hard.
It's
Mm.
tricky, right? And it's like is it being mechanistic to say antibiotics are not healing me? They're just helping prevent certain bacterial infections so that I can heal. Like it's such a twisted logic that people were promoting.
Mm.
And I find it like I guess I'll go there. It's like kind of patriarchal and like almost in a way you could see like midwifery or like these non-clinical things that do have substantial cultural clout and
Mhm.
like work relatively well. Might be sketchy here and there, but like largely it works. And as if we don't know how to do life. It's like,
Right.
hey, where are the hold up, hold the phone. I don't know how to do life. I need to go phone an expert. Like we have this and it's part of us and it was part of us, but industrialization and other forces kind of removed it, right? And we're trying to figure out what's next. Matt, anything to add on this kind of topic?
Yeah, I think I would just echo what Selma said, and I just would just point to how change and paradigm shift is just so scary for society in general, and
Mm-hmm.
institutions, and yeah, institutions are not super plastic and changeable and at the pace that's required of them at this point in time. And when we bring something in like MDMA assisted therapy, it's 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 radical from a perspective. I mean, it's totally rational and appropriate, and it's also very radical the way that it can affect change, and the process itself, the experiential, the really raw experiential nature of it is really radical when it's held up to other modalities and other ways we're used to working with people in like a standard setting. Um, and so I think it's hard to understand, one, from the outside, and two, scary from a lens of that wants dissected control over situations, when kind of effectively we need to drop control under certain circumstances in order to regain our liberty, um, in a facilitated setting, and so that's what I would add that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. I love the comment about institutions not necessarily being plastic and adaptable at the rate at
Yeah.
which science evolves, right? Like there's um, yeah, there's a lot to say here. Just brief. I'll do it really quick, and then we can jump into
Good.
some other fun
Good.
topics y'all proposed. So, like this idea that institutions, they're really designed to be conservative, right? They're like conserve momentum and energy and like a certain directionality. When perhaps nature wants to do other things, like it's a helpful system, but also like there are issues with it too, and like yeah, as you suggested, paradigm shifts. Sorry, this dog is going nuts, but we'll get her the attention she
Aw.
needs shortly.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, we have this kind of like conservative institution thing, and we have science coming in that potentially like breaks the mold on what the paradigm is, and the paradigm like really struggles to adapt to that new data. And we're kind of seeing that in astrophysics right now. I don't know if any of you are following. There's all sorts of new data with the new telescope that's challenging the traditional Big Bang theory, and it's fascinating and very worth. I chatted with some
Wow.
really interesting physicists a few months ago, and I was like, "Whoa, this has been a problem that you've been working on for decades." So they just like keep adding on stuff to make the model work, and I think we see that sometimes in contemporary medicine, as opposed to saying, "What if we just backed off and like tried on a different outfit for a moment, and maybe it's different." And the other part here is chatting with some depth psychologists like late last year about what's happening with like the new administration and all sorts of things. For a lot of people it feels really apocalyptic, in part because there is a real risk, in part because it's drastic change, and often drastic change feels apocalyptic. And I'm wondering if from the institutional perspective, seeing this drastic change, there's kind of like this like archetypal fear of something approximating apocalypse that could be coming. Any thoughts on that before we jump to some other fun topics? It's pretty far out, so don't
I
feel
love it.
obligated.
I love it. I mean, just to pull in just the perspective you brought in about the astrophysics. I'm getting through 1491. Uh-oh. Did we lose you, Joe? Well, yeah, just to add in for the 1491, when they're all the archaeologists are coming up with different, yeah, just didn't know if you got to
Oh,
we're
we're good.
writing about what were the migration patterns of the native people coming in, and when that one threatened to sort of destabilize the institution. And then just to tie it into what we're doing here is that on one hand, we're in New England, but the nice benefit of being in Maine is that we're not that close to the Boston institutional bubble, and so we do have a little more liberty to experiment. And we it used to be rent wasn't expensive here, but we could afford a place to rent, and we could start up a business. And one silly metaphor is like if you wanted to start a new brewery, you could go up to Maine and start your new brewery and start your small business there. And so we sort of had that advantage here of starting the clinic here. We didn't have as much oversight limitations in terms of like malpractice is more affordable up in Maine. And we could work like a lot of this is our passion project. So we would have like the side jobs where we could cover our basic family needs and then engage in this passion project and not be sort of tied to those larger golden handcuffs of like, oh, I gotta be engaged in this institutional job 40 plus hours a week and have no free time to engage in passion projects. And so that's sort of the piece about like the world building conversation that Kyle had a while back with Jeff Batch, and what good medicine is trying to do when people are going into these expanded states and reassessing their lives and their values, and they're coming out with like, I want to be more tender and open-hearted as I show up into the world. But if you had that experience on on Boylston Street in Boston, and then you had to walk out of the clinic onto the street, suddenly all the protectors are back on, all the coping mechanisms are back on, and being able to step into maybe a building surrounded by individuals who are also trying to practice walking with a tender heart, or other core values that arise from their individual discovery of what's important to them through these healing practices.
Thanks for that. So I'm kind of curious to dig into this topic, how psychedelics can bring back the sacred and spiritual into Western medicine, because like this is, I remember an early transpersonal psychology conference had this topic of around like resacralization, like how do we make the world feel special again, as opposed to like, you know, dead automaton stuff. Like barely, you know, is there free will? Is there something magical here that is worthy of experience, or are we just kind of like factory drones, right? Like
Hmm.
how do we get the world to feel more important? And can psychedelics play a part of that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the mixed blessings about Western medicine engaging in psychedelics. It's been lovely to connect to highly trained allopathic physicians who might have come from a pretty mechanistic perspective, and they're trying to have to shift their worldview. Or for some of them, it's like it's actually liberating that now they can actually talk about some of the components in somebody's life that you can't really get into. I mean, they're
Mm-hmm.
pockets. It's not like that those conversations aren't happening at all. Like palliative care, there's some beautiful, profound conversations happening in palliative care. In prenatal care and sort of like pregnancy and childbirth, there can be some really beautiful conversations happening there about emphasizing what's sacred. Um, but I would say we need more. Um, and and so psychedelics, like for you have two physicians joining you right now, but in, you know, as I said, we're a bunch of psychotherapists as well. But how to broaden the awareness in Western medicine that like that spark, that desire to live, that desire to thrive, that desire to heal, that innate healing intelligence can be sacred in its own aspect.
Mm.
And so like just maybe like raising the awareness there, and then we'll see what happens in sort of the beyond of like, okay, if you are sacred, how can we treat this plant as sacred, this planet as sacred? How do we treat the other relationships with the real humans in front of you, but also all the others?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and so we've had an ongoing project the last few years at Riverbird and supported by Good Medicine, which we lovingly and lightly call healing for healers. And it's really our opportunity to interface with people that are in the healthcare professions, physicians, nurses, therapists, physical therapists, wider net than that even. And, really offer them the space to come in and experience this. And really, we tailor this for people that are working oftentimes on the front lines, who are exposed to incredible amounts of stress and burnout and compassion fatigue from their work, and then also having the busy, full American life that everybody is now living these days. And it's been a really beautiful interface. It's group work, so again, kind of touching on our community approaches to this project of psychedelic work and healing and transformation and kind of remembering together what it is to be human. And so that program's been running for, I think, 2.5 or 3 years now, and we've seen many people from what would be called the Western medicine paradigm, the world, the people in the trenches doing the work. And it's been really amazingly gratifying to interface with people and give them a space to recontact themselves in a space, that's been made quiet, that there's the opportunity to dig into their own experience of existence, their own spirituality. And so, yeah, we hold those like roughly monthly. And yeah, I'll pause there, let Selma speak a little bit about it too, because it is, I think, something that really unites us as a clinic. All of us kind of came to this work in various ways, but I think there's definitely an emphasis in all of our experiences of experiencing ceremony in group, and the power of the collective human condition to bear witness to it and to be witnessed in it in our own unique frequency, is just so potent.
Right.
This is what's so great about working collaboratively with other people, is that Matt's poetic side that can describe that so beautifully comes out. And I love that you actually, because Matt, you brought in that we do the group work ceremonially. We also structure the individual work ceremonially as well, and it is tricky. We're in the whitest state of the United States. And so we sort of have like the longest history of coming and doing the atrocities that our ancestors did to the natives who are here, in this sort of like European science is separate from religion perspective, and that's caused a lot of wounds. And so how are we as the bodies that we are in offering ceremony to people who are even more entrenched or more in that sort of Western medical model? And so like so we're always like, all right, what are some of the components of ceremony? It's like offerings, prayer, reciprocity, like, you know, what are the components of ceremony that make it ritualized, and sort of like and these aspects of like, okay, the space needs to be physically clean, but like, how do we have the space be emotionally clear, so that everybody could be more in tune with the emotions that are rising, and just that inquiry of like, how do you structure a sacred experience, is sort of an ongoing learning process for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's a lot we can do with that question, and it's so cool, right? Like, because we can go to our own roots, we can go locally to those roots, we can go, I don't know, as far back as like history goes to like the Zoroastrian stuff to figure out what were those oldest of cultures doing. And it's interesting, right? It's
Yeah.
and it's a very personal choice, but I love the idea of like how do we do some reciprocity, like how, like I grew up in New Hampshire, which is only slightly less white than Maine, and like, you know, I feel it. I grew up with all sorts of like stories about indigenous folks, and like, you know, just how rich that culture was before getting absolutely wiped out. I got a chance to know some Abenaki folks who apparently their numbers were so small that the feds did not want to recognize them as a tribe, and therefore withheld services because their numbers were so low, which is bonkers. Like, I can't, like, how can somebody kind of have that level of audacity, I guess is the word, to say, no, we're just going to shave some money here because we mostly eliminated all of you, which is like, what? How is that right?
Yeah. I would say that the way that we've gone very slowly with this, because, you know, there's a constant learning process whenever you're practicing in any way, and in this way for sure. And you know, we teach and we do our work from our own experience primarily, and really, I think that's paramount to hold in the heart and in the mind as we're engaging in these work, because when we bring people in from the outside, many of the people we work with are psychedelic naive, and they're really kind of taking a flyer on something they've heard about, and they're trusting in us, and they're coming in with a bunch of apprehension, and they're hoping to be able to lower their shoulders down a couple inches and get in contact with themselves. Sometimes they have a huge agenda for themselves and their healing. And the thing that they can really feel in all the swirl of that is our own centering on ourselves and our space, and the trust in our own experience and our lived experience through our travels, you know, physically in this world and astrally in all the ways. And so the ceremonial component is really variable depending on who's facilitating. It's different if it's me and Selma. It's different if it's me and another. It's always has a different flavor to it. Because we show up just with our experience. And I think that makes a big difference, because there's, you know, you can feel appropriation when it's in the room. And so our, you know, the ceremonial work we do, I think it's simple, but it's resonant. And that's what people are looking for all the time, really. They're looking to feel incongruence with themselves in the present moment. And that congruence comes about through the feelings of safety and trust, and seeing other people congruent with themselves. And so ceremonially, it's quite simple, oftentimes, but so important to hold it that way, to make the space, to mark a beginning and a middle and an end, and do that simply how we might do, you know, with song, or as a common way we do. We sing at the beginning of our group sessions, and we bring people in and we're settled down, and we do like a very brief introduction sometimes, but then the first thing we'll do is we'll sing together for a couple minutes, and we'll teach them a simple song that we know, that we, you know, they'll sing again and again as they come back with us, to take with them as their own version of a soothing song, a medicine song. And so we start with a song and we end with a song, and so it's really not elaborate at all, but it's consistent and clear, and I think that's for me. I think that's what holds so much of the ceremonial component for our clinic.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, in my experience, like this idea of inclusion of spirituality is it's so complicated, but also so simple, depending on how you choose to structure it. In our world, it's kind of like these things happen, and there's a lot of different pathways for you to choose, and it's like, you know, it's about you going on this kind of spiritual quest to figure it out for yourself. And like, we don't necessarily want to put anything on you, and you don't even need to go on a spiritual quest necessarily. It's just who are you? Why are you here? What do you need to support that? And you know, maybe I think you need to read Gurdjieff. It's like, well, you know, Gurdjieff had some really funny quotes. Maybe you go there, or maybe you go on this other. Like, you know, it's a spiritual, non-directive approach. Maybe like kind of coming out of that Esalen frame of, you know, the religion of no religion.
Yeah.
So I had a memory pop up for me about a conference I was at earlier this year. CIIS was the venue, and it was a kind of Alfred North Whitehead process philosophy conference that Matt Siegel put together. And there's a number of really clever folks there, including a biologist, synthetic biologist from Tufts, gave a presentation. And this is circling back to the inner healing intelligence topic. And he was showing his results. The guy's name is Michael Levin. And he was showing these results that he was finding in the lab, doing really wild experiments that effectively, to me, validated kind of the Sheldrake morphogenic field concept, which to me is like a concept that can help us kind of frame this healing intelligence thing. And it was wild because he's putting like single human cells, like stem cells, into other things in vitro, and showing that like human cells will do these things regardless of context. And then also like manipulating certain really simple organisms and showing that there's no reason why this should heal in this way other than some sort of field theory, like a morphogenic field, which is fascinating to me. So yeah, check out this guy's work, Michael Levin, if people want to learn more, out of Tufts, Levin. I was, my jaw was on the floor as he was sharing his data, and I was like, okay, this is the best, in my mind, like experimental evidence I've seen supporting this stuff, and I'm happy to see more. So if folks want to send it over, let's do that.
Sweet.
Yeah. So that just came up. I did a little searching to find his name, but I'll dig in more and hopefully get him on to talk about this. So next up is this concept around expanded states of consciousness, helping individuals and potentially individuals heal and change, and also groups, like social situations change. Does anybody want to jump in on that?
I've been going first a lot, Matt. Do you want to give it a shot, or?
Yeah, let's see if I can not just repeat myself. I guess that, yeah, good medicine for sure, and Riverbird as well are just community-oriented projects ultimately. And in the sense of Riverbird, we didn't start offering group work at the outset, but it became clear early on in the project that we wanted a venue where group work could happen, and that that the healing of the individual really isn't complete until they could be in community, feel like they have community, and have some of the experiences that they would want to have in community, and so part of our work really is is to help people gain access into that, and then specifically into our group work. So some of our individual patients, somebody might come to us and they've been very isolated in their suffering process, and so they'll do some individual work with us. And at some point, we would try to move them into a group setting so that they could experience themselves with others with ketamine in a ceremonial space. And that move feels really important. It's kind of like in meditative practice, it's great if you can get really calm and peaceful on the cushion, but when you leave your front door to go out into the world, how does your practice show up? And similarly for good medicine is really explicitly built around community. So it's really helpful to have that symbiotic relationship. And it's really about getting people together all the time. We just feel like this project of humanity has become very, very splintered and atomized. And the medicine isn't more stuff. It isn't more widgets. And it's really us. It's us being with each other in physical space, looking each other eye to eye, feeling each other's heart and energy and aliveness, that is going to keep us together and move us into the future in a positive way. So obviously psychedelics can be hugely powerful in leveraging that if held appropriately.
Yeah. I think it was Jeff Bash who was talking about how he was holding this, just this historical way that Western psychotherapy is very individualistic. And it's, in some senses, it can even be more isolating. There's certainly circumstances where giving individual attention is absolutely necessary and a good beginning point. And some people might stay there, but we certainly want to, because there's sort of this balance of like, for people who are suffering and feel disempowered, how are we helping them gain agency or self-empowerment and that sense of like self-worth and self-efficacy to move forward in the world? And so those are important components of the individual, but the social change happens in groups and community. And so when we can sort of hold that individual and their suffering, also in the context of the outside systems that are influencing them and impacting them, but also be amongst a group of peers who also get it, who also notice that, and then maybe have a place where they can practice trying to create the change that they want to see in the world. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's just to add on to that. And so, yeah, I love that how do we shift away from this? It's that one-on-one or that solo person who's just doing this individual work and you're only going to figure this out on your own. And that's not how social change is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I was getting critiqued yesterday for some comment I made. I forget what it was. I think it was around like some Ram Dass quote I was sharing about, peace here now kind of concept. And like, what is he like? Oh, I thought it was to overthrow the rich. I'm like, well, dude, like I'm going to let people choose their own path here. but it's like, this is the classic hippies versus yippies debate, I think. Like Timothy Leary Ram Dass versus like Abby Hoffman and like the social change thing. So there's a lot of people who said, no, we shouldn't do psychedelics because it's escapist, but it's also like we need to get through some trauma so that we can figure out how best to engage with the world is my framing lately. Yeah. And let's, we can keep it sub 100 experiences probably. Like I think most people could get well within less than 10, depending. But it's, like the social change thing, I think a lot of healing needs to happen. And then that trickles out to social stuff. I extend this into like ending the drug war so we can have more of our fellow citizens back and engaged in the world, hopefully healed. Mm-hmm. If we can start scaling psychedelic therapy and other good group therapy modalities. Because I think you're right. Like group therapy is so important because it scales better. It's cheaper. Healing in group. That's how I've mostly done it, is healing in group with breathwork practices. So I can totally relate to what you're saying here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any comments or open space? Or you're going to jump to the next one?
Yeah.
You're percolating, Matt. What's in there?
I don't know if
Okay.
there's anything. There is something, but it's not quite there yet.
But
Yeah, I
so
think
there's
there's
this.
something there for me about. Sorry to interrupt you, Joe. I was,
Oh,
but
good.
yeah, just about the hippies versus yippies thing. Something I'm not like deeply involved with at all. I think it's a hearing that I can feel that that's in the field. I guess what I would say is that we need to figure out how to be with ourselves and be with reality. And I think that's part of like the work that can happen with psychedelics in a kind of a roundabout way. And what I'd mean is that like a lot of our suffering um, has to do with just not being okay with how things are. There's a fundamental non-acceptance of the way things are, and then you can go any which direction with that, but there's an internal struggle there with the current circumstances. And because because psychedelics do alter us so profoundly, they confront us with aspects of our nature that we usually are not forced to deal with. So I guess that was kind of propped up by the term escapism, and certainly one can fall into kind of an abusive relationship with psychedelics and escape in certain ways. But I think that's the value of doing work in settings that are built specifically for uh, built specifically to avoid escapism, and the preparation and the commitment that the people we feel, the people that are coming through our clinic, that we can really feel that in them, really offsets that amount of escapism that one could fall into. And I think, yeah, it's just never black and white. It's just never like so simple. And so I yeah, it's just painful just to hear like kind of the criticisms that maybe you're getting about that like piece here now. Like, yeah, like we all want that. And and I don't know sure that we're gonna like oppress the oppressors out of that. Like are we gonna get peace now by oppressing the oppressors? Are we gonna use the same psychological and verbal attacks to get where we want to be? And I'm not so sure that's the case.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. You've touched onto this before a little bit. I mean, just to share a little bit of sort of like the the how to avoid getting stuck into, I can't remember, she called it like the healing trap, or sort of
Mm,
like where somebody actually is just doing more and more psychedelic work because they don't want to address the messiness of their human condition. And it's actually like better just to be doing good big work with big psychedelic medicines and not go back and do the laundry
mm,
after the ecstasy. And um, so that's certainly there. And what I find that by having an established community, like literally grounded here, and people showing up regularly and having longitudinal groups, is there's an accountability that happens as well. So in individual work, somebody can have like a deep, profound insight arise through their psychedelic therapy session. But if nobody else is there to hear it besides their therapist, as Matt says, is like when they go to show up in the world, how is that like, oh, like, just to have that reflected by another community member that um, they're maybe off track right now, and then also just do it in a kind relational way. And then also just to tie in a little bit about, I think I certainly have, like, in my fantasy world, we would be living in a situation where we wouldn't need psychedelics, or we'd need much less psychedelics. We would have the ashrams, we would have the dojos, we would have the time and space to commit into a practice that isn't so dependent on on a psychedelic medicine. And it still could be used, say, for like rites of passage or initiations, or in moments where there's big change that needs to happen. But like, we're really stuck right now. And so to utilize psychedelics as a little accelerant, or like a time for people to reclaim the resources that they need to then hopefully build that world. where there's less need for psychedelics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I think what I experience often is people just kind of using far too much and potentially, yes, not getting into a practice for a lot of reasons, right? It's like, oh, I could practice this thing for, 5,000 hours and maybe I'll get okay at it. Or I can go eat this thing or drink this thing and I feel amazing immediately, and that's a hard deal. There was this AI CEO. I think I just heard this quote yesterday. It's like people aren't enjoying the process of making music anymore because it's so hard to like make a song and write music and learn how to play and understand music theory. It's like, musicians went bananas because like I really appreciate composers doing really good work. I really appreciate amazing performers too, just because, some kind of synthetic robot can do okay with these things doesn't necessarily mean it's tapping into the same resources we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can like if we sort of think about archetypes or like transpersonal things, can AI tap into the muses? Right? Can it's
a little
AI
TBD, but probably not.
Yeah, if they tap into the morphogenic field, maybe. But yeah, it's this. There's the can an AI really capture the complexities of a human experience? Yeah, that's TBD, as you said. But for now, yeah. Oh my gosh, so much love and praise to the musicians because we open with a song and we close with the song, and we're trying to do like a little symbolic reciprocity by creating music with our own bodies and also practicing resonance in a way that is pretty somatic for people to sing and to like be in the place of their inner critic and judges and whatnot when they're trying to create music with their own bodies. But then it's a recorded playlist for the group session, and my gosh, the music is the medicine in that place so much. And yeah, so much love to the musicians out there.
Yeah. And you were talking, I think, earlier about this interview Kyle did with I don't know that I can say his last name here, Jeff Bache.
Bache.
Fair. Bathje. So sorry, Jeff. But this idea of like, what do we call it? World bridging.
Word building. Yeah.
Right. Like what struck you about that conversation, this topic that's like worth going into?
One, it was just lovely to hear from another very experienced psychotherapist who's doing this work and is balancing this reality, balancing this like the individuality versus the group process and how to transition people there. But then the next step of like, and now how do you show up to create the change you want to see in the world? And so like, I just had questions of like, oh, does he have a good medicine? Does he have breath worker who is also doing beautiful work in the same studio, playing loud music and having people go through catharsis and that facilitator and those participants coming and having lunch with us? Or like, I'm just sort of, what are the ways that it's that old adage of like, think globally, act locally. Like how do you just create these little smaller examples of the world you want to live in? It's like I'm personally, for me, like I'm in this interesting position of like I love this passion project so much. I'm like, oh, am I turning into a workaholic? Because it's so beautiful to be able to show up. Another nice sweet thing, I think, just to tie in, which is a little tangential, is that Matt Stevens is a family physician in training. I'm a family physician through my training. Liz Strawbridge is a family physician in training. And I think there's just something, a difference with family medicine training where it is like our kids show up to lunch. Our kids can come to the dances that happen here. And so there is really this, like, we're experimenting in this world building here and doing our best. So that's how I justify I'm not a pure workaholic, because the family's showing up too. But that's, yeah. So it's just like the little creative ways. Sometimes it's just it can feel so impossible to take those steps to create the little world, the little example of the worlds that you're dreaming that can grow and be an example for others. I think I'd leave it there for the time being. But yeah.
Yeah, Matt, anything you'd like to add on this topic?
No, I didn't catch the podcast, so I'm not familiar with the territory. But yeah, I agree with
Yeah, it was
Selma.
kind
Yeah,
of a
there's
lot
the
of
next step.
commentary.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It was a lot of commentary post MAPS MDMA failure, and like rebutting a lot of the critiques, and just kind of trying to move this whole situation forward, because we do need to heal this planet and this world, and we do need to like build these new spaces, right? It's like it's one thing to just go home and veg out and watch Simpsons. Like, I'm probably dating myself, but like there's you know definitely value in creating new spaces and new community and new types of places to be with others that is really healing. And
Yeah.
like this resurgence in board games is, I think, a little helpful for folks. And like I wish I had the free time to explore Dungeons and Dragons. I do not, though it has appeal, right? But like this is a huge resurgence right now, and it's like that there is a sort of like flexing of your imagination muscles. And
Yeah.
do you really need a video screen all the time?
Yeah.
It was like just like there was. It felt like the critiques that were coming towards Maps and Lycos were coming from people who weren't offering solutions, who
Right.
just had critiques, and so there was this encouragement from Jeff to be like, try to be part of the solution. Don't try to be just a deconstructionalist all the time. But then to jump over to that imagination piece, I mean, I think that's a component that sadly the removal of imagination that we do in conventional school systems it's a problem. And I'm so glad that board games have resurged. Wingspan, there's just like all these like the resurgence of sitting together around a group of people and just exercising, imagining, trying to work out in a different society or world. It's like shared collaborative side of what science fiction writers would do sometimes, like when trying to like dabble in a different world. Yeah, but
Right.
definitely try Wingspan. That would be a recommendation for you. If you it's a long one. It's a long one. Settlers of Catan, it just brings out the worst in people. Settlers of Catan was like one of the first that like turned the thing, but that gets pretty aggressive.
Yeah. Turns out I'm not a nice person.
Yeah.
I learned that.
You drive a hard bargain.
Good Lord.
No, that's cool. It's heartening to hear that there's a huge resurgence in board game playing, and it's like the solutions maybe aren't so complicated, and that's kind of like our project. It's like we're trying to get people together in spaces of various types, but the explicit reason is to be together, and there's the other reason outside of it, but really the medicine comes through when you like walk out the door and you've just been at a dance with some people, whatever kind of dance, or you walk out of the door and you just had, a group ketamine session or one of our integration sessions. And it's just like, you feel connected. And it starts to kind of knock some of the grime off of the social animals that we are and are kind of moving away from, and takes us a little bit out of our own little reality tunnels. And I think it's the medicine. We got to get into space with each other of all different ideas and philosophies, and remember that we're still really human. We're not so othered. It feels like the world building that like we're engaged with mostly. Yeah.
Love that. And I love your drop of reality tunnels. Thanks for that. People should dig into that topic. And then where in my background, I did a lot of like permaculture training. I was involved in this movement called transition towns, and like this like concept of how can you be more resilient where you live, and like how many of us can even have a conversation with our neighbors? Not very many. Like what can we do to make that happen? What can we do to like your HOA president won't stop being a brat. Like, how do you survive that? I think this is really important skills, not only for like local resilience, but resilience in this kind of larger psychedelic community. And yeah, like beyond board games, like, can you cook food for somebody and bring it over? Like, can you make them some cookies or something, right? And like that is a peace building exercise. Like cookies for
Yeah.
peace is a real thing, and like what,
Yeah.
and maybe you try to host like a neighborhood like cookout or something, and just get to know who's next door. And likewise in the psychedelic community, like I personally tapped out of the psychedelic community in person for a couple years because I saw all sorts of stuff that felt very unsafe for me and for the larger community. And I said, I'm out. I'm back now. I'm actually going to events regularly and, being with people, and it's lovely. But I think all of us have a sort of leadership obligation, if we're in leadership in this space or want to be or have the capacity to be. Like, how do we calm these rivalries and beefs down and like let's actively build peace with each other? Because the alternative is to be like marketed to death. Like I was watching TV and all the last night. Like I have not been really exposed to like commercials in a long time, and I saw like within 20 minutes I saw like 7 like Ozempic alternative ads, and I'm like, well, this is wild. Like, good for those companies, I guess, but wow. Like, there's now a drug to make you skinny and pretty, and it's like, well, Jesus, like, is that really what we need right now? Or like, do we need a little bit more love and compassion? Yeah. And no shade on people that are using that drug, right? But it's like, how just marketing dollars are gonna like really erode us in our communities. Continue to, as they already have, right?
Yeah, the ratios are gobsmacking in terms of how much money a drug marketing company spends in a day, which is still like magnitudes more than how much a public health initiative has in their budget to spend over the whole year. And which is kind of related back to like, there's a lot of criticisms that I have around the institution of public health and how it's like it's fallen into its own traps. But just to put it in perspective about like within the corporate spaces, like the money that's flowing there, and when we're just trying to get lead out of the water, how like just like it's I think the ratio, and this is like school from a number of years ago, but it was like, okay, a public health campaign has $10,000 to spend over the year, and a drug marketing company spends $90,000 in one day. Like it was just totally different. And so, and maybe to speak a little bit, I know we're going to end really soon. What I really loved about what the different love languages of baking cookies and having cookouts, and that was something that was historically, before we got so inundated with devices and being in our reality tunnels that were just fed so much through social media, like that's how rural Mainers were. Like when the snowstorm showed up, you didn't care about political alignments. You didn't care. You just wanted to make sure your neighbors all were shoveled and plowed out, so that like people could show up to their jobs or people could take care of their kids. And so it's just like it does exist in these areas. It's getting lost though. I mean, in the 20 years or so, it's remarkable. It's sad. And how much that has changed. Yeah.
Do you see healing of this in your kind of client/patient populations?
Of the isolation or healing of
healing meaning like are we doing more community things? Like having people over and or like hosting events or going to dances or whatever that is for people.
A good medicine, yeah. We're really fortunate about that. I mean, because that's what we encourage as an integration tool or integration practice, and that sort of like self-led all right, now I know what's the, like, if somebody says like, oh my gosh, dancing, I haven't danced in so long, we can say like, well, there is a dance happening at Good Medicine. Actually,
Yeah.
there's like 3 dances happening here. And, and simultaneously, if people want to receive body work,
Yeah.
there's massage therapy here, there's acupuncture here. Are people doing that more in their own local communities? That's going to be more anecdotal, case by case. But we can certainly talk about like more people are showing up here,
Yeah.
which is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So we definitely offer, as part of our integration practice, just the invitation to come back to Good Medicine, not necessarily ever to do any work at Riverbird again, but just to come back to experience the offerings that happen there. And there are talks, there are dances, there's sauna groups, there's all sorts of things. And I think one of the potent things that comes out of group work is that it's really common for us to leave the integration session after the last session with people and have people say the ketamine was really interesting and powerful, but the group was actually the thing that like got me. It was like, wow. And to have the opportunity to be able to kind of come home to yourself. I mean, it kind of sounds cliche, but like when you do step into your vulnerability and it is received with open, compassionate hearts as we cultivate the circle, then you can leave feeling it's okay to be you. And then it's okay to be you. Then it's way easier to show up at a dance where maybe you know one other person or you just know the space because the space is familiar to you. Like, wow, that the place where we have our dances is the place where we have our ketamine group circles. And so it's like a returning to a space that's exciting and safe and represents the possibility of just being okay with who we are. And that's delightful to see that when that happens, to see somebody that's come through and done some work and to see them out in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important. Yeah, that's going to be hard for you guys to track overall because it's not like it's an inpatient situation where you can track everything, right? It's very much treat them and they go into the wild again. Yeah, and I think Portland's like a really, it's an interesting place. Like there is that main culture, but it's also just like a beautiful city and like plenty of community spaces, small, really interesting small businesses and like, fun places to go eat. Like it's gorgeous. And I have spent a decent amount of time in Portland. And sorry, somebody keeps coming and telling me the expression drug war isn't good. Okay, the war on drugs. Well, these are colloquialisms. Sorry. They are helpful in that everybody knows them. They are not helpful in that I guess this is like an interesting semantic debate that this person has been coming towards us with around are drugs illegal? No, it's the possession of certain drugs can be illegal. And it's like sure, but I don't really know how helpful that is to like, get into that debate right now. I'm against anybody getting incarcerated for this stuff, and also I'm really against the government putting in policies in place that put me and my friends at risk, and anybody else in this like larger community. And for lack of a better word, it's the drug war for me. That's what I call it. Come up with a clever name, I'm down. Yeah,
There,
and you guys
there,
go for
so
it.
there is a little like there is Decriminalized Maine. It's a tiny little group of people, but they worked on the deprioritization in Portland, and so there's like once again thinking globally, acting locally. Like if there's anybody in the region of Maine that wants to work on a different municipality, we've done efforts to work on the state level in terms of decriminalization of substances. That came much more from the harm reduction, opioids use support groups. There's also been efforts to bring psilocybin, and that's the slow institutional change. I mean, it's even happening. Yeah, but that's a whole other conversation. But with you in terms of like, how are we gonna change? And we have to start small, given the powers that we have right now.
Yeah. And are you all doing any kind of harm reduction work in Portland?
We all engage in different ways with harm reduction.
Mm-hmm.
We're not like volunteering at the needle exchange. Some people do. Some people work at the free clinics. For a while, the unhoused population was literally across the street from us. So we definitely were showing up with a cart and doing wound care and syringe cleanups and triaging people there. But I think that's a conversation maybe some other time. It's just like here we are as a ketamine clinic trying to change the narrative around using substances, expanded states of consciousness, intoxicants, or however you want to put it, for healing, and simultaneously, like we're making some progress in the opioid overdose deaths that are happening in Maine, but we have this whole other population of people who are being criminalized or stigmatized and for engaging in a relationship with a substance to address their wounds. And that's another like discussion to talk to conventional healthcare providers who might just fall into the typical stigmatizing perspective about people who are using drugs for in the best, like I like to believe in the innate good of people, that they're doing it because they're trying to take care of themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, Matt, what did you? Sorry.
I don't have anything to add to that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. So, where can people learn more about these organizations and each of your work?
We have websites. So, Good Medicine has a pretty active Instagram now. But if people are seeking clinical services with Riverbird, it's best to start with our website. And we're not really individualistic. I mean, I have a LinkedIn up there, but it's not like it's not my preferred place to meet people.
Yeah, so going to our website, riverbirdclinic.com, you'll learn a lot more about our work, our philosophy, and can contact us through that. I'm happy to answer questions, explain more. Yeah.
Great. And are there any particular events coming up that people in New England might be interested in joining for?
The Good Medicine Collective has their events calendar up of like what's happening, say for those dances or for the breathwork circles. Something that we've been launched for a few months now is we call it the Psychedelic Studio. So it's a monthly in-person meetup in the same studio where we do all this healing work, and the conversation topic shifts each week. So I think we're going to have in February 12th, Zach Hygenity, who is from the Trip Report, but is also the acupuncturist here at House. He's hosting an in-person discussion about consciousness. And so it's a community conversation just to go deeper into specific topics around psychedelics.
Amazing. Well, really appreciate you both joining today. And I'm excited to potentially visit in a few months. Next time I'm in New England, I think that'd be really fun. And then, just to keep seeing what you all are up to. It's lovely to know that such a heartful group is doing really great work in a beautiful city here.
Cool.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thanks,
I mean,
Joe.
you've been working this for a long time, and keeping the conversation going, and so much admiration for all that you're holding and how you do your beautiful work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Lots of conversations.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.